Hi, my name is Rebecca Lee, and I co-wrote this book, The Mercury Detoxification Manual, with Andy Cutler, PhD, who should have got a Nobel Prize for what he figured out. The book explains step by step how to get heavy metals, particularly mercury, out of your body without injuring yourself, which is very easy to do. Chronic mercury toxicity, although largely undiagnosed, is epidemic in the United States and probably in the world too. It is arguably the root cause behind most of the idiopathic chronic problems we see virtually everywhere these days. Computer. Hi, Tressie. I wanted to start off this talk by just reminding people that Andy Cutler is mentioned as a member of the Heroic Heroes Honor Roll in Robert Kennedy's book, The Real Anthony Fauci. So today I'm honored and delighted to speak with Tressie Taylor. Tressie is the author of Detoxing Kids, A Parent's Guide to Safe Metal Detox, which is a wonderful resource that shines a light on gentle and effective methods for helping children to detoxify. Tressie's journey began in 2007 when her son was diagnosed with autism, igniting her quest to uncover solutions that could enhance his quality of life. This personal journey prompted her to explore formal training in naturopathy, herbalism, and traditional Islamic medicine. What makes Tressie truly special is that her knowledge isn't just based on academic training, it's deeply rooted in hands-on experience as a parent. She has 6 children, and she has chelated all 6 of them using the Andy Cutler protocol. She also homeschooled all of these children, an impressive feat. So you can connect with her at jendetox.com, where she shares her expertise and offers support and guidance to those on their path to recovery and holistic well-being. So good morning, Tressie, and I'm so glad we were able to do this. So you've brought up and homeschooled and chelated 6 kids. That's certainly impressive. I know I have a lot to learn from listening to you. I really do. And what did you say?
It's very nice to be here, Rebecca. I always enjoy listening to your wisdom in the groups and what you have to say.
Thanks. Anyway, tell us. We want to hear your story today. So tell us what happened with your children. How did your child wind up autistic, and how did you find Andy Cutler? So tell us your story about that. Was it your first child that got the diagnosis? What happened? How did it go?
Well, he's all the way down to number 5. So he's a way
to 5 did that happen?
Yeah, he's a way there. So honestly, it's just environmental for us. It was environmental and Tylenol based. I think we're probably our 2 big things. But honestly, he was 2. A friend of ours from overseas was looking for ABA therapy here in the States.
Mm-hmm.
I just started searching that for her, trying to see what I could find. They were going to come and bring their child here. And I started reading the lists of symptoms because ABA, that she didn't have an ASD diagnosis for her son, but ABA is, of course, the standard treatment for ASD disorders. So lists of symptoms, and I was shocked because we had all but one of them. That's how we started our journey.
And did that make you look back at your other kids?
So it was a while coming before I started looking at the rest of the family. Initially it was just a matter of trying to figure out what to do for him. And I spent a lot of time online in terms of, searching and things like that. So I found groups that are dealing with diet and biomed and things like that. So I started with doctors, like most people do, went to biomed doctors and, got some things like that going. And then we moved. And when we moved, we lost all of that support because we went to a very small town. And that is when I found Andy. I found Andy Cutler. That was probably a year and a half into it. I went back online. He refused to take all the supplements because they don't taste very good, right? So we stopped giving them. And then when I tried to bring them back, as his behavior was declining, he refused to take them. And I thought, well, there's got to be something else. If I can't get him back on these, what else can I find? So searching online, I went back to the groups, and one of the ladies there talked about Cutler. And so I decided, instead of following her, I decided to go and look for his information directly.
Okay.
Because she didn't chelate properly. But yeah, that was the first post that I made on the Autism Mercury group all the way back in 2009 was answered by Andy directly. And he basically said, look, stop listening to people who are going to hurt your kid, and either figure out how to do it right or don't do it at all. And I'm like, wow, this guy's either really knows what he's talking about or he's really arrogant.
Yeah, that's the thing with Andy was like, yes.
So I started reading more and more and more, and experiences, and started doing it.
He used to say, he used to say to parents, like, why do you want to take your kid back to the person who poisoned them in the first place?
Yeah.
That was one thing he used to say. It was pretty harsh, but
he's
true.
an amazing person. He sometimes challenged you with those harsh words. But when you get to know him, it's the challenge. It's not a harshness of heart.
No, he used to say that he had to take that tone.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that worked to keep people from injuring themselves.
And he was right, because if he had come with some warm fuzzies and was one of 10 or 15 voices in there, I don't know how serious I would have taken him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you do? You bought Amalgam Illness and read it?
Oh yeah. Bought Amalgam Illness, bought Hair Test, read pretty much every post he ever did in Anabasu all the way back to 99.
I read everything he ever said. I became like a devotee, which was embarrassing for him.
It took me a while to get there. I didn't immediately believe everything, because there's so many people out there that have so many things to say. And it took us, our first year of chelation, I think I only got 26 rounds in because of getting diverted by other things, vitamin A, protocol, and just, B12, just all the stuff. And so it probably took that long before I was able to really hone in and say, actually, this is the thing that's truly working, and this is what I'm going to do. And then it was just in my experience, going back and saying, every time I diverted from Andy's advice, we were held back. We didn't make that kind of progress. Every time I followed it, we saw all this progress. So it was really a step-by-step process for me, getting to the point where, wow, I actually really trust what this person has to say. Every science, he backs up what he says. He doesn't ever come out here and make some, blanket, fluffy statements. It's all very knowledge-based and really very impressive.
Yeah. That's what when I first read Amalgam Illness, it just, okay, this guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Then I handed it over to my son-in-law, who was a chemical engineer, to look at. He never bought into it, but he read the book. He looked at it. He said, yes, this is not, bullshit. This is real.
Right. I mean, honestly, but there's a lot, I think, in the beginning for parents, at least for those of us without a science background, I don't know. There's so many people.
Yeah.
Experts.
You have to watch out for those, what do they call them? Those psychopaths, those charismatic psychopaths. There's a lot of them out there, and they're hard to not listen to because they're charismatic.
Well, and that was part of it, I think, and that also was part of my conversations with Andy too, where I talked a lot about the history of the biomedical movement and the personalities, and I read and looked into the history of the organizations that promoted those different things, and got a really good understanding, because Andy was part of that in the beginning. And that's why I started looking into it, because I'm like, wait a minute, he was giving lectures, and his protocol was actually used way in the beginning when everybody was having so much success with chelation.
Yes. That's so what
I started looking into that, and I started looking for the evidence of that, and I started looking in some of the other books where you can see just things here and there that show you, yeah, when, way back in the early 2000s, when chelation was the thing that was going to cure all of our children, it was Andy's protocol that was doing that, not
Working. Yeah. Well, he
yeah.
said that the MAPS doctors, or whatever they're called, or what they're called now, got together and had a conference and decided it was too onerous to ask the parents to wake up at night.
Yeah, a lot of people don't want to do it. And so, it's something that they learn as part of their professional career, is getting that compliance, which in a lot of ways, that compliance it's key. If you don't get compliance, if people don't do it, they're not going to see the benefit. So without having, foot in this world and really being able to look at it with their own experience, I guess they just threw it out like it didn't matter. But actually we did. And that's part of it. So just to put it out there, in our journey, when we were with a doctor, we were using ALA, we were using DMSA, we were using all of the things. I actually didn't change in the beginning. I didn't change any of our supplements. I took the supplements that the doctor had given us, and I found a way to change some of the dosing, because we had put a lot of money into that. And well, some of them were very bad tasting, and I didn't use those, luckily, because they weren't actually very good for my son. But the chelators,
You had them.
I had them. ALA was part of an antioxidant product.
Yeah, I see that all the time.
Yeah, but I just dosed that according to ALA is what I did in the beginning. And so actually what we ended up doing is we were on more chelators, the ALA and the DMSA, with our old doctor than I was on doing Andy's protocol. So we actually decreased the amount of chelator that I was giving, but I gave it according to half-life. And I saw more benefits in my son in 3 rounds than I had seen in a year and a half.
I should think you would have seen some big downs with chelating off schedule like that.
I was really, really lucky. Obviously, I mean, of course, we probably saw some negatives. For us, I say lucky. I guess I was lucky in that we moved, because who knows how long I would have stuck to it. But for us, yeast was such a big thing for my son. He was really a gut kid, and his function was day and night when we controlled yeast. So taking the antifungals with the old doctor gave us a lot of benefits.
Okay, so that you were like rejoicing with that. Yeah.
And
Did
so
the other doctors understand about the adrenal fatigue the way Andy emphasized?
I have yet to see doctors prescribing or recommending adrenal support.
Any doctor at all, yeah.
There's a few out there now who have actually had enough patients coming from Cutler protocol groups and then seeing them and have had them saying, hey, this is really amazing. And they're not usually part of those core biomedical organizations. I hate to call them out by name, but
Yeah.
they're usually kind of adjunct on the side. They're doing it, they're reading some of the stuff on their own, but they're listening to their patients more than the people who are formulating the protocols that they want pushed out there. So those are the doctors that are starting to get on board with some of the adrenal support, but it's still by and large being missed.
We're training them.
Yeah.
So how long before you noticed that something was improving and it wasn't just yeast?
Oh, it was 3 rounds.
3 rounds.
It was 3 rounds, and I saw the language change.
Yeah.
It was truly amazing. And we were using too much. I was starting on too high a dose. Like I said, he was already taking such high doses with the other doctor that I started on basically Andy's max dose.
For a child?
Yeah. And so it was way too high, but I thought, hey, he's handling this much, right? But we saw some major improvements. He used to have a little script. That was the only thing. He had no functional language. He would walk in the room, he would introduce himself, he would say, my name is, how are you? And then he would just look at you, and then he would leave. And he didn't respond to his name, none of that. So it was their third round in, and me and my husband were sitting in the kitchen talking about what we were doing, and we used his name a couple of times, and he came all the way from the other room, ran in and said, "What do you need?" And it was like, what? We weren't even talking to him. We were just talking about him. And it was like, oh, something is definitely working. Something is definitely working. And so there was no doubt, because obviously I had to adjust the dose. We had some major adrenal issues because I wasn't on adrenal support. So we had to make some adjustments, and we had to get the dose down to what was actually appropriate for him, which was about 12 megs. We started on 25.
25, yeah, yeah.
So he had some headaches.
Yeah. I didn't even know what adrenal glands were when I got into this stuff. Never heard of them. What's that?
Well, the first time you're introduced to this, for me, for a lot of parents, like it doesn't make sense. This is also foreign. The idea of taking our child's health into our own hands is terrifying. And we don't have a background in any of these things. And it seems so daunting. And then years later, it's like, wow, this is so simple. Like, we just mix up the chelator. I used to mix it up in a little baby food jar with some orange juice and syringes, and we just throw it in the bag and go wherever we needed to go. Life went on. And in fact, we were able to go more because my child could function better.
Right.
In the beginning, I wasn't leaving the house because he had about a 30-minute window before he would start, tantruming and just not
disintegrating. Yeah. You see a lot of kids disintegrating all over the place now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think when you go out and look around? I mean, you get sort of radar eyes for people who are toxic and children who are toxic too.
It's just, and in our world, it's so many people.
It's an awful lot. Yeah.
It really is. And it's so hard because you want to go and say, hey, just try it.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do, not really, until people are ready to hear, or the paradigm, like the pressure builds up and builds up and builds up against this wall, which is it's sort of like, and it's an impermeable membrane, and the pressure is building up and building up and building up until it's going to pop sometime, I guess.
Yeah, at some point in time, when the financial, incentive shifts to something else, we'll be able to look back and say, okay, here's what happened, just like they always do. When they go back, Andy used to call it the dark ages of medicine, and they'll move on. Things will open up. This is my hope anyway. And they'll look back and say, oh, now we're not using these things anymore. We can say this is what happened in the past.
Well, I don't know. Once he said to me that this is not the first time there's been a mass public poisoning and nobody noticed.
No, it's not. But it's, of course, it's those people who were affected that realized, or that knew when they moved on. The rest of us didn't hear about it at all.
The Roman Empire or something like that apparently was completely toxic with lead, but maybe it was.
Okay. Well, and way back in the day, they used to use mercury as a immortal.
Yeah, nobody.
You go 3
medicinally for centuries. It's been used medicinally. It's been around a long time, and nobody's really noticed. But it's getting so dire that I think. I mean, when you got 50% of the children in your country sick with a chronic disease, somebody's going to have to start investigating at some point.
At some point in time, medicine has to take its rightful place and leave the realm of religion and get back into, harm, right? At some point in time. But here we are.
The religion, like the Vatican during the Inquisition or something. That's what it's like. Yeah. I often call the, when I go to the hospital, I have to go to the hospital, go to the doctor's office. It's like going to, I call it the cathedral, or you're going into this, this palace. You're going into a palace or a cathedral, and you're walking around, and there's so much money there. I used to sell sandwiches to the shops in the hospital, and I go in there and look around and say, boy, you can tell that money is no object in this place. Because I'd sell in little restaurants around and in little supermarkets, but you go into the hospital like money's not an object, and you're coming up against this monolith of belief. It must have been like that, for the heretics back in the days when the Catholic Church was so monolithic. Yeah.
I mean, probably. For us, though, we have a huge blessing in that what we need is freely available. We don't actually have to need, we don't actually have to have permission from anybody to be able to move forward with it. So at this point in time, what we need to get a hold of to be able to help our children is available to us. We just have to go get it, and it's relatively inexpensive.
Yeah, I think that. But people are sort of trained to believe that they have to go to, I mean, I never took my kids to the doctor when I was another generation, but I'd have to see, like a terrible bloody emergency before I took my kids to a doctor.
Yeah.
Now people just, they're bought into that system, and they can't, they're so scared to go out on their own.
Well, and they still see anything in a capsule as a medicine. And sometimes we have to sit back and understand, and I don't know what with your client base, but sometimes we have to sit back and talk to people and just put things in perspective. It's nutrient based. So much of what we do is just nutrition. It's just that our children may not be very open to eating certain things, and our food supply has been so adulterated that sometimes we have to go and get some concentrated nutrition in them. But really, people have to be able to weigh the benefit and the risk in anything you do, and kind of get outside your fear spot and sit down and really just look at it. What are the risks? And I think it's important for people to be able to do this, step back and kind of look at this from an objective viewpoint in terms of all of these things, because when we're sitting in that emotional spot, that's even when we make bad choices in who we're going to trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need to sit back. We need to look at this and say, hey, I tell people all the time, let's weigh the pros and cons, weigh the risks and benefits and what you're going to try.
Yeah.
And make sure that the risks are very, very low to non-existent.
I often tell parents that they have nothing to lose. They really don't have anything to lose by trying this.
And certainly sometimes they, that's why I try to list it out and say, look, here's your risks. We do it all the time. Here's your risks. Let's look at what those really are. And you can then look at that and say, okay, these are short term. And I have a solution if, for example, I take some ALA and there are metals present and it stirs up some yeast. I'm going to get some bad behavior because yeast is going to be irritating the system. But that's a short-term risk, right? That's not harmful. And it only happens if you have metals that need to be moved out, and we know what to do about it. So, you have to be able to put that stuff in perspective to be able to move forward.
They have to be able to recognize that those behaviors are due to yeast too, because maybe some people look at them and are just like panicked by them. They just think, oh, that's just autism.
And they do that a lot. That's why that's one of the things. So we talk about symptoms, treat what you see is an herbal paradigm, treat what you see.
Right.
It's based on, observation, right? We look at what's happening outside to figure out what's going on inside. And so I spend my time teaching people that same thing. We do the symptoms list. We pull them up. They're available online. You can get them for free. Look at the symptoms that you've got. Look in there. Look at those symptoms. What does that mean? Write them down, go through, see what you're looking at, be able to put these, because one thing that I found, Rebecca, when I was doing this with my own child, is so many things that I didn't know we had something we could do about it. And it was through answering questions for other people, because I probably would never have asked the question. I would have just assumed, like you said, oh, this is just part of the ASD. But somebody else asked the question. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, there's probably nothing you can do about that. But then I go into Anabasu and I search and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a supplement for that. And so, through that process, it's like, yes, these behaviors are treatable. They're not just part of a diagnosis, which literally is based on behavior, right?
Yeah, the diagnosis is literally based on behavior.
ASD.
Yes,
Yeah, it's
yes.
based on a list of behaviors, and many of them could be directly related back to things like yeast.
Yeah, there's no ASD virus that we
Right.
can pin it on.
And
Yeah,
I think that's the thing that we need to keep in mind too. So we're not, how can I say it? To me, I say we're not curing ASD. ASD is a diagnosis based on behaviors. We're looking at those list of behaviors and figuring out if any of those are based on actually something else.
yeah. And
And
what can you do directly to fix those or
right,
to mitigate them?
because at the end of the day, the issue with our children isn't how they think or process information. The issue most of our children have are really all of those side effects, all of those side behaviors that are interfering with their ability to function in the world, right? All the sensory stuff, all the, people talk about, oh, they think in pictures. Thinking in pictures isn't really a problem, right? But if you can't go outside and be able to function because of the level of noise and how that is irritating the nervous system,
Yeah.
that's a problem,
Yes.
right?
How's your son now? Was your son or your daughter? Was your son?
Uh, it's my son. I have 3 boys and 3 girls. He's in college.
He's in college and he couldn't talk.
Yeah, yeah. And he worked hard to get there.
Mhm.
Um, but he's an amazing kid. He's an amazing kid. He's not a kid anymore. He's an amazing person.
Young man.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember you saying that you think that that having this poisoning, affects you your entire life, that it changes who you are. And because I think I told you that I've had autistic adults and young people, worry that they're going to lose their personality when they detox. And you had something to say about that, I think.
Did I've talked to some people, some of my clients that have older children, and they do have this fear. And the thing is, whatever it was, whenever a person was poisoned. So we know that when people become toxic younger, the brain goes through different reorganizations, for lack of a better
Right.
way of explaining that, as it matures and the connections are being made. And so if the toxin was introduced into the system early in life, like it is with our kids, it has an effect on how those connections are formed.
Formed, yes, yes.
And, personality is, well,
A
it's
bunch of habits, really.
it's a philosophical topic, right? But you've got genetics, you've got environment, you've got, how you came up and your experiences. And, detoxing isn't going to rewire the brain. It's not going to change the way you think in terms of what makes up a person and who they are and how their personality is. What it does is free them from all of the little physical things that get in their way of being able to make the decisions and the choices and the, things like that. It frees that up, right? So it's not going to turn an introvert into an extrovert or vice versa, but it will take away the sensory issues and different.
Anxiety disorders, which I see so
Exactly.
much of.
Yeah, all those things that get in that interfere. So that way, when that person says, okay, I maybe don't like big crowds, I don't like big groups, but I have to enter this place because I want to get this job, or I want to meet this person who's going to be there. And guess what? I can handle it. And I can choose to go into this environment. I can choose to sit here and enjoy myself for this moment, even if it's not my favorite place to be. I have that ability. Whereas, before it would be so overwhelming to me that it would be so miserable that I would never make that choice.
Mhm,
And that's the difference between what we're doing versus, what people think we're doing. Right.
People think we're doing. Well, this has really been a great conversation, Tressie. You think, is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we?
I don't know. I'm open to, discussing pretty much anything with anybody, but I don't really have an agenda. So
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to be doing this again, and I really look forward to doing that. Why don't you tell whoever watches this how to contact you? And you do consultations and work with mostly children, right? Do you do adults?
I work with parents who are trying to chelate their kids, essentially. And
Parents need help usually
a
too.
lot of times we end up moving forward with the parents as well, because people are in the same environment, so they
I've never seen
be toxic.
rarely see a parent that doesn't need a little, at least adrenal support.
And that's why I ended up chelating the family is because of that. We're all in the same environment, so you can see how the metals kind of affected all of us. And as long as we're doing it with one, we do it with everybody. Why look back in these years? You already had to get up in the middle of the night.
You might as well.
Right. It's not that much more difficult to just do the whole group. So I have worked with adults, but my specialty is really with kids.
Okay, well, give us the name of how to contact you.
GenDetox.com.
GenDetox.com.
Yeah.
All right, then. I'm going to close this. I have to put on my glasses to see how to do it. Pause, stop.